Welcome back to Cosmic Comics. Today I'm going to look at a story arc that forever cements the place of the Kree and Skrulls within the pages of Marvel. Outside of Captain Marvel, both races have had only a handful of appearances to date, but this story will change all that by telling a tale that spans across races, planets, and star systems, as their ancient conflict roils to a boil. To catch up on the story to date, please feel free to watch my videos on the early appearances of both the Kree and the Skrulls, and another looking at the historical beginnings of the conflict. Today's tale begins in Avengers Volume 1, Issue number 89, written by Roy Thomas and published in June of 1971. The comic opens with Captain Marvel creeping down a dark street while three sets of eyes watch him from the shadows. As they step forward, Marvel looks alarmed to see three Avengers. The three Avengers appeal to him, insisting that they are his friends and that he needs to come with them. Marvel insists that they don't know what's best for him, and when he refuses to go with them, Quicksilver attacks Marvel, and Marvel calls them out for their use of force. Marvel meets violence with violence and lands a hard punch on Quicksilver. Vision insists that Marvel is in danger. Marvel is surprised when Vision turns intangible on him, but then he uses a setting on his Unibeam to solidify Vision's body. When did Marvel get his Unibeam back? I'll come back to this later. Wanda wants to try her hex power on the Unibeam, but Marvel insists that while on Earth, one prejudice that was ingrained upon him was to never hit a lady. Say what? Really? Really? Marvel flies away and Wanda, for whatever reason, doesn't attempt to use her hex power to stop him. Before going far, Marvel settles onto a rooftop where he can still see the Avengers. He's planning his escape, but before he can do so, he's blasted by a ray gun. Marvel falls back. Landing the shot is none other than Rick Jones. This comes as a huge shock to anybody who had been reading Captain Marvel Volume 1 up to this point, as the last time we saw these two, Marvel was stuck in the negative zone and could only come into our world by switching places with Rick Jones. In fact, the writers in charge of Captain Marvel said they had no intention of splitting the duo up. While Marvel is laid out, Rick Jones allows the Avengers to come and collect him. Rick is obviously bitter about having to betray Marvel and take him out, but Vision and Quicksilver attempt to convince Rick that he did great work. The opening to this story is fantastic because it takes all of the reader's expectations and tosses them right out the window. I feel that the story does a great job of drawing one in simply because you want an explanation to what the heck is going on here. The Avengers make their way back to the shuttle and take Marvel to a military hospital where a Dr. Donaldson and his assistant are waiting on the Avengers to arrive. Once they walk in, Dr. Donaldson instructs them to strap the alien, that would be Marvel, to the decontamination chair. Marvel is strapped in a strange device pulled down over his head that has crazy lights or explosions going off everywhere. Turning back towards the Avengers, all but Vision show looks of shock and horror as they fear for both their lives and Marvel's. While this is happening, Rick Jones gives us a bit of a flashback to let us know some of what has transpired. Rick was in the middle of his big break, playing a show on Bleecker Street. Rick has to stop during the middle of his set, at which time Marvel reaches out, telling him that there is a chance of separating the two of them. Marvel then shows Rick an image of Reed Richards stuck inside the negative zone. Marvel is watching the recent battle between Reed Richards and Annihilus unfold and is there to witness when Agatha Harkness's spell creates millions of Reed Richards spread out across the negative zone. If you want to know more about that encounter, check out Fantastic Four Volume 1, Issue number 109, and watch my video linked above where I take a look at the origins of and early appearances of Annihilus. Marvel watches Reed Richards escape before being left alone once more. Marvel wants Rick Jones to visit Reed Richards in hopes of finding a way to rescue Marvel. Previously, Bruce Banner had told Rick Jones not to ask Reed about the negative zone because Reed has gone on the record stating that the place is too dangerous to become common knowledge. Once Rick reaches the Baxter building, he slams his wrists together and allows Captain Marvel to approach the building. Marvel starts on the ground floor where he gets in a fight with a guard before deciding to fly to the top floors. Rick wants Marvel to hurry up and he feels that he is being watched, but Marvel insists that that's impossible while Rick is encased in his aura of negativism. Once Marvel gets to the top, he breaks into the Fantastic Four's lab by tearing 3-inch steel doors off their hinges. The Fantastic Four are currently away at Whisper Hill, but have backups in place. An alarm goes off at Avengers Mansion where Vision is sitting, waiting to be alerted to the intruder. It turns out that Sue had a premonition that somebody would break in on this night. Vision would have had everybody ready to go, but admits that he's always been skeptical of such human feelings. As the Avengers approach Baxter Tower, the entire place is lit up with energy bolts arcing across the sky. Marvel is hardly keeping his activities a secret. Turns out that Marvel thought his Kree training would help him in knowing how to use the equipment, but Reed's machines are complex enough that it is taking Marvel longer than expected. Rick is getting more scared by the minute from the feeling of being watched. All Marvel needs to do now is wait for the machine to power up before opening a portal. Rick Jones will be capable of leaping through and returning home. The Avengers arrive to stop Marvel, but it's too late. The machine is powered up and Marvel tells Rick to make the leap. Rick passes through the gateway, but he isn't alone. Coming forth from the negative zone is the silhouette of Annihilus. He makes it through the gateway, and immediately his heart is set on conquering this universe, just like he did most of the negative zone. Wanda attempts to use her hex power on Annihilus, but amazingly, he's too inhuman for her power to have any effect. Quicksilver attempts to run in, but is tossed to the side. Vision calls for Rick Jones to turn the transmitter back on, which begins to pull Annihilus back into the negative zone. Vision stands before Annihilus, who grabs a hold of him. All the while, the pull of the gateway behind him grows ever stronger. Vision waits a few moments, and just when it seems as though neither party will move, he decreases his mass. This causes Annihilus to lose his grip, being pulled back into the gateway behind him. Yup, you saw it. Annihilus made the trip between worlds, and now he's never going to stop searching for a way back. While the Avengers fought off Annihilus, Marvel fled the battle and stole the Quinjet. After Marvel is left, Quicksilver notices a Geiger counter going nuts near the place Marvel was standing, but dying down now that he's gone. From this little bit of information, the heroes conclude that Marvel's body has been storing up radiation from his extended stays within the negative zone. Radiation that might now release itself in a cataclysmic chain reaction. Vision surmises that they have the same 3 hours Marvel usually has in this world before he explodes or something. And why is it the same 3 hours? And could this have also been avoided if Rick occasionally let Marvel loose from the negative zone? Vision decides that they need to find and treat Marvel before the 3-hour time period is up. There should be no way for anybody to know where Marvel is headed, but for some reason Rick Jones knows that he is returning to Cape Canaveral, Florida. Why is Marvel even flying? First, he can actually fly. And second, we were previously told that he retained all the powers given to him by Zoe, which includes the ability to teleport wherever he wants. As if they were reading my mind, the writers drop another clue. Perhaps Marvel doesn't have all of his powers at this time. As he ejects from the Quinjet, Marvel tells us that he can no longer fly, but is capable of making giant leaps within the Earth's gravity. Once on the ground, Marvel plans to retrieve a cache containing one of his Unibeam blasters and use that to help him steal a rocket. It's fun to flip back through the pages of this issue and see when Marvel has something on his wrist and when he doesn't. Great eye for detail here. Once Rick is pulled through the negative zone to our world, neither him nor Marvel are wearing anything on their wrist anymore. This changes once more after Marvel retrieves his wrist-mounted Unibeam. And in many of the panels, that bracelet has a raised notch in it for the Unibeam. Before Marvel can get a spaceship and escape Earth, the Avengers catch up to him, and thus we have our current situation where the Avengers have captured Captain Marvel and strapped him into what looks like a modified electric chair. What's going on here is that they are attempting to draw the radiation off of Captain Marvel, but they discover that the nega radiation is far more powerful than expected. If they don't complete the process, the radiation will build up all over again and put them back at square one. Vision offers to use the solar jewel on his head to help store the power and straps in to receive it. Well, he doesn't really receive it, because then we're given this awesome panel where Vision is repeatedly blasting Captain Marvel with his jewel. Eventually, Dr. Donaldson calls for the experiment to stop before either or both of the subjects are killed. Both heroes are lifeless when wheeled out of the room. Rick tells us that all Marvel wanted to do was return to his home planet. The tone then switches and things, yes things, are transpiring within the Kree galaxy. What's going down is troublesome indeed. The Supreme Intelligence appears to be caught off guard when Ronan the Accuser appears before him within the Hall of Justice. Mind you that Ronan still has a death sentence over his head for attempting to overthrow the Supreme Intelligence along with former Prime Minister Zarek. Ronan wastes no time and pulls up an image of Marvel being treated by Dr. Donaldson. Ronan refers to Marvel as his greatest foe and soon-to-be victim. The Supreme Intelligence doesn't like the sound of this and calls for his guards, but none appear. Ronan and the minions who freed him have already killed the guards. Ronan is claiming his spot as ruler of the Kree Empire, and his first order of business is to turn on Kree Sentry number 459. For a full backstory on the Kree Sentry, please check out my video looking into the early appearances of the Kree within the Marvel Universe and when it returns in the Supreme War saga. The Sentry currently rests under armed guard at Cape Canaveral. The Sentry rises, but the guards have no chance against a machine such as this. Once the Sentry is given orders, it focuses on completing those orders and nothing else. This time it's been instructed to kill Captain Marvel. The issue ends with the Sentry bursting into Marvel's hospital room. Issue 90 starts with a great splash page showing the Sentry entering the room from the other direction. The Sentry makes it clear that he has no beef with the Avengers. If they stand down and let him do his job, he has no intention of causing them harm. Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch both read into the Sentry's warning that it might be afraid that it doesn't have what it takes to face off against 3 Avengers. Wanda drops a ceiling on the Sentry, but as would be expected, that does little to no good. Quicksilver attempts to beat up the Sentry, but is tossed aside. Maybe I don't read enough Avengers comics, but I swear, this is what happens at least 2 out of every 3 times Quicksilver attempts to dive into a battle, especially against large, massive foes. The final Avenger standing between Captain Marvel and death is Vision, who refuses to yield. Android versus Android. The Sentry attempts to hit Vision with a blast of energy, but it does no good. This is followed by attempting to physically force his way past Vision. The Sentry points out that since both of them are androids, that the 2 of them shouldn't be fighting battles for humans. It's interesting to see the Sentry thinking outside of its programming, or maybe he's merely attempting a coy approach to get the Vision to back down. Vision continues to make his form more and more dense, and it causes the floor to buckle and collapse beneath him. When the victor flies out of the hole, it is the Sentry and not Vision. While battling against Vision, the Sentry is given new orders. Instead of killing Captain Marvel, he cradles him in his arms. The Sentry is leaving with Marvel, who wakes up in time to hear the Sentry referring to Plan Atavus. Marvel starts freaking out and asks the Sentry to kill him here and now. The Sentry refuses and teleports away. Rick claims to have never heard Marvel ever mention Plan Atavus, and a weakened Vision joins the others from below. As the Avengers regroup, head of Cape Security, Carol Danvers, approaches and demands that each of them file a full report on the events that just took place. Vision wants to leave, but Carol points out that they can't chase something that disappears without a trace. The Avengers file their reports, and as they leave, they make it clear that they are dependent on Rick Jones to provide as much information as he can about both Marvel and the Kree. One story in particular stands out to Rick, and I can see why. This is nuts and the kind of thing Rick needs to be informing historians about. During a period of time when most humans were still living as proverbial cavemen, some other humans built a monstrous city. 1,000 years after the Kree had created a new race of humans, Sentry number 459 arrived to check in on them. It is from the Sentry that this peoples confirm that it is Kree who set them on a path ahead of the other humans. Because they have gained additional powers, the Sentry informs them to henceforth think of themselves as Inhumans. Afterwards, Sentry number 459 returns to the Kree spaceport, where he stays until he's awakened once more in Fantastic Four Volume 1, Issue number 64. From there, Rick Jones spends one page recounting the events of the first 21 issues of Captain Marvel Volume 1. I will take issue with one panel of this page. Rick Jones claims that Marvel was stuck in the negative zone, except for the short times that Rick was able to trade atoms with him, completely glossing over the fact that he would keep Marvel held prisoner in the negative zone for months until it suited Rick's interest to let him out, and oftentimes waiting until the last possible second. The Avengers return to their mansion where they are greeted by another alarm, this one with a message from another Avenger. Goliath lets them know that he is responding to a distress call from the Wasp and asking for assistance at their location in Alaska. Her and Hank are both doing environmental research from an ice-breaking ship. The two of them lost contact with the nearest government outpost and went to check things out. While heading that direction, the two of them run across a large swath of the Arctic which is turned tropical. In the center of the tropics stands a looming tower. Hank says he thinks he knows what is going on before turning around and backhanding Jan into unconsciousness. Seriously, this can't be a healthy marriage. While Wasp is out, he straps her to a giant dragonfly and sends her out of the area thanks to his ability to control insects. Jan tells her story to Goliath, who ends up being a real ass by suggesting that she's suffering from nothing more than a bad dream. Seriously, dude. She points out the giant dead dragonfly as proof, but is understandably annoyed. Goliath then grabs the Quinjet and ditches her because he doesn't want to work with women since Natasha broke up with him. He lands within the tropical jungle and faces off against some kind of giant ape sloth before getting shot in the back. Who would be so dastardly? It's Ronan the Accuser and Sentry number 459. As Ronan looks upon his work, the Sentry informs him that a second Quinjet is approaching. As soon as the Avengers land, Jan runs off into the jungle, nearly getting herself killed by an unexpected blast from Sentry number 459. The Sentry has arrived and somehow taken over Goliath as well, whose eyes are deadened and staring straight ahead. The rest of the Avengers are hesitant to attack, but Jan is intent on saving Hank and flies right into the fray and begins unleashing wasp stings upon Goliath's head. Vision goes on the attack, but this time the Sentry is ready for him. After tossing a boulder towards the Sentry knows exactly how long it takes Vision before he can become intangible again, and he makes his move accordingly. Quicksilver and Wasp battle Goliath, who manages to swat the Wasp from the sky. Inside the tower at the center of the jungle, Ronan has Marvel strung up. Marvel employs Ronan to let the Avengers go, but Ronan tells Marvel that the events have moved beyond vengeance. Ronan seeks the destruction of all mankind. To do this, he plans on using Plan Atavus. The second time this has been brought up. The foundations for Plan Atavus were laid when the Kree first learned of the planet Earth. Marvel insists that Ronan must abandon his plan, but Ronan hasn't come this far to stop. He now speaks with the might of the entire Kree Empire to back him up. The plan has already been started. Okay, here it is. He's got Evo rays sweeping forth from the tower, and these are constantly growing stronger. Everything they touch is turning back the evolutionary clock, returning it to the same state it was when the Kree first discovered our planet. As soon as the ray hits civilized areas, it will erase millions of years worth of human history. Marvel still can't comprehend why Earth is worth all of this trouble. Ronan points out that the Kree sentry outside will eventually beat the Avengers, even though it is taking the sentry far too long. Ronan also remembers his own defeat at the hands of the Fantastic Four. As fast as our species is developing new technologies, Ronan sees that humans have the potential to one day threaten Kree's supremacy. Of note, Marvel has had the same thoughts in the past. Instead of allowing the problem to grow and fester, Ronan is going to end the threat right now. In the final panel of the issue, we are shown a devolved Hank Pym who looks like a giant ape and is about to attack his wife. The situation with Janet and Hank unfolds exactly like you would expect it to. Instead of smashing Janet, Hank pauses, decides that she's pretty, and carries her off. This is a very King Kong sort of response. Ronan, who is watching this unfold, decides that the ape wanted a mate. Yeah, that's what I was afraid of as well. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Ronan makes a note to monitor the situation, while Marvel insists that the Avengers will have to save the day. Ronan is getting tired of Marvel's mouth and tells him to be silent before pointing out his successes. After all, he has seemingly already defeated Marvel, Yellow Jacket, the Wasp, and Goliath. All that stands between himself and victory are 2 mutants, an android, and Rick Jones. By the way, I love that Rick Jones is tossing giant rocks at the Sentry. Each moment that passes increases the Evo's ray's reach. Rick's rock tossing ends up saving the day. Wanda is capable of casting a hex on Rick's shattered stone, which causes its makeup to be formed of magnetic alloys that attach themselves to the Sentry's head. This temporarily blinds the Sentry in battle. Quicksilver urges Vision to hurry up and end the battle. Vision has been putting this moment off, but realizes that he needs to act. If he was a Mortal Kombat character, this would totally be one of his finishing moves. He reaches through Goliath's chest and causes Goliath to collapse by changing his density. Doing this is always risky, and this time it puts Goliath's life at risk. The Sentry, always adapting, has had time to analyze the fragments on his head and neutralize them. Vision instructs the twins to stand back while he attempts to defeat the Sentry, which has stopped him now twice before. Again, Vision goes in for his signature move, but this time his foe is ready. He planned for his contingency following their first battle. The Vision is now racked up 3 losses against the Sentry. Amazing. Wanda races to his side and is blasted by the Sentry. Pietro rushes to his sister's side, but is stopped when the Sentry puts forth a burning ring of fire. All Pietro wants to do is go down, down, down into that burning ring of fire. Rick Jones insists that the 2 of them are no match for the Sentry, and it won't be good if all of them get captured or killed. Although it pains him to do so, Quicksilver grabs Rick Jones and flees from the Sentry, while Rick promises that they will come back. Afterwards, the Sentry stands among the destruction it wrought. It notes that it doesn't have any sort of emotional response to the battle. The Sentry doesn't hate its enemies, nor does it celebrate in their defeat. Emotions such as pride or hatred belong to lesser creatures. Sentries, on the other hand, obey, fight, and triumph. Admittedly, this was an impressive victory on the part of the Sentry, beating the Avengers. Out in the jungle, Pietro pouts while Rick looks for solutions. Rick notices 3 ape-like creatures and recognizes them as the 3 techs that were stationed at the government base near here. Pietro is ready to move on, but Rick sees something else going on. But before we dive into that, we need to check on things inside of the tower. With 3 out of 4 Avengers captured, Ronan and the Sentry calculate that a speedster and a youth don't pose any danger to their plan. As for what is holding our heroes in place, Marvel is held in place by the mineral content of his own body, while Wanda and Vision are being held in energy bonds programmed to nullify their powers. As Wanda and Vision hang there, that's the moment when Wanda decides to make a sexual move on Vision. She moves in to give him a kiss, but Vision turns away, insisting that it cannot be because he's not a real boy, merely a copy of a living being. Ronan is delighted and surprised to find a mutant, even though it's later retconned and it turns out that she's not a mutant. Anyways, he's surprised to find a mutant and an android in love. After witnessing this tender moment, Ronan decides to check in on Jan. We're shown the scene that caught Rick's attention. Hank is defending Janet against the 3 government technicians. Hank beats back the 3 challengers, and Jan begins to wake up as he celebrates his victory. Back at the tower, Ronan shares the next phase of his plan with Marvel. Ronan has a device that will greatly increase the effect of the Evo rays. To show its power, he uses a frog which de-evolves back into an amoeba. Outside, Rick and Quicksilver attempt to find a way into the Citadel, but there are no good openings to be found. Quicksilver then picks up a pointed stick and uses his speed to burst through the wall. Inside, Ronan threatens to use his gun equipped with the more powerful Evo ray on the Scarlet Witch. At that moment, Quicksilver enters the battle and knocks the gun out of Ronan's hands. Ronan is tired of dealing with all this and calls for Sentry 459 to sweep the chamber with arcs of death. Rick creeps up on Marvel and asks how to free him. Marvel starts yelling at Rick to take the unibeam from his wrist. Rick doesn't seem all that impressed with the idea. Marvel has to tell Rick not to aim at the sentry, but instead to shoot out the central control panel. Ronan uses his universal weapon to take out Quicksilver. Marvel told Rick where to shoot, and Rick lets loose a blast of solid light strong enough to cut through any metal. Once it strikes, the Citadel begins shutting down. The entire place is going to return to the ice. Behind Ronan comes a voice which calls him by his new title, Supremor. This indicates that the Kree people have accepted Ronan's mantle of power. Marvel recognizes the device in the chamber as a type of one-way communication from the Kree galaxy. Things back home are bad and need urgent attention. In the time Ronan has been gone, an emergency of the 5th magnitude has taken place, and the Kree galaxy is now at war and under assault from Skrulls. Ronan recognizes the gravity of his mistake in taking over the Empire and then pretty much abandoning his throne to concentrate all of his time and attention on the distraction of Earth. He says that he can no longer toy with this miserable blemish upon the map. Ronan transports himself back to his people. The Sentry is left behind without new orders. For the second time now, we see Sentry number 459 left behind, attempting to hold together a crumbling Kree outpost. Goliath is freed from the Sentry's mental grasp, and the Avengers flee the Citadel. Once outside, they notice the jungle is disappearing, and the Arctic air is moving back in fast. Jan is out there with Hank, who has reverted back to his normal form. The Avengers gather Hank and the 3 engineers together and attempt to keep them warm. Behind them, the Kree Citadel crashes down through the ice. The Avengers brag about having won, and Hank stops to note that it was the Avengers who came later after himself and Jan that did all the work in saving. He takes it as a sign that he should retire to the lab permanently and formally resigns as an Avenger. Janet joins him, and they both leave the Avengers effective immediately. Hank says if the Kree ever return, he will do his part in fighting against them, but he's going to do so from the lab. These first 2 issues effectively end up setting the pieces in place for the Kree Skrull War. We know who and where all the major players are, and have gotten an explanation as to why Marvel and Rick have been separated. After stopping Ronan from destroying the planet, the Avengers are enjoying a few quiet days in which they can relax. This doesn't happen very often, or last very long. The relaxation comes to an end when Jarvis bursts into the room with an early bird edition of the Daily Bugle. He nearly topples Wanda over on his way into the room. Quicksilver is shocked by the headline in which the 3 government engineers that they saved have spilled the beans on the top secret Alaska battle between the Avengers and a mysterious alien race known only as the Kree. And of note, the president is already moving to appoint a special commission to investigate. Vision remarks that the engineers were supposed to remain quiet about what happened. In a moment of glorious irony, Pietro reflects about how happy he is to be a mutant and not one of those humans who only understand fear. Goliath comes in to see what all the fuss is about, while Pietro turns on the television to hear the latest developments. H. Warren Craddock has recently been appointed head of the new Alien Activities Commission, and when asked about his emergency powers, he is not at liberty to discuss them. Everything he says is most likely already publicly known information. He lets the people know that the Kree had a secret base in the heart of Alaska that was prepared to turn back evolution by billions of years. I have to say, I like how refreshingly frank and open this guy is, despite the angry eyes and bad attitude. The reporters know Captain Marvel is a Kree and wonder what Craddock thinks of the fact that the Avengers have seemingly befriended him. Craddock then drops the bomb. He has a list of 153 citizens that are alien spies, and he's going to investigate them all, even if it takes him into the Avengers mansion. Captain Marvel has overheard what is happening and offers to turn himself in. He doesn't want to cause any trouble for the Avengers through guilt by association. Most of the Avengers protest Marvel handing himself over to the authorities, but Goliath thinks Marvel is making sense. The public doesn't know that Marvel isn't a spy, and having him cooperating would make it easier for the Avengers to investigate. Vision makes an appeal that by allowing that, they are on a slippery slope, and his argument is reminiscent of the Holocaust-era poem, First They Came, by Martin Niemöller. Vision points out that Marvel will be safe from the United States government as long as he stays in the mansion because it is outside of local or federal jurisdiction. Marvel, on the other hand, doesn't want to stay on Earth at all. His desire is to be home fighting against Ronan's rule and the Skrull invasion. Carol Danvers is flying in towards Avengers Mansion. Outside, a crowd of protesters is gathered demanding that the Avengers hand over the Kree soldier. As she comes in, Carol's helicopter experiences engine trouble. Marvel, hearing Carol's pleas for help, bursts into action. He can't currently fly, so he leaps and sends his body hurtling into the crashing bird. Marvel's quick action seems to do little or nothing to slow the copter's descent. In the end, it is Vision who leaps into action and saves the life of both Carol and Marvel. The Avengers recognize Carol from their time at Cape Canaveral. Wanda is concerned about Vision, but he is unscathed and tells her not to worry. She points out that he would have died if there had been an explosion. Vision insists that she is too emotional about some things. We then get this creepy scene where Pietro attempts to stick up for his sister, but Wanda tells him to back off and reminds her brother that Vision is the most powerful Avenger. What's going on there? The situation is escalating. S.H.I.E.L.D., including Nick Fury and Dum Dum Dugan, fly in via jet. They've been called in by the United States government to watch the mansion from the air. Pietro, who moments ago was worried about somebody dissing his sister, points his finger at Carol and almost accuses her of being part of the surveillance team. She lets Pietro know that she's not a spy. In fact, she's taken a leave of absence from being head of security at the Cape. Carol is here hoping that she can reciprocate for Marvel saving her life so many times. She offers Marvel a chance to hide out at a farm in upstate New York. Not sure that this is the best idea. While at the mansion, Marvel is outside of the reach of the feds. Marvel rejects Carol's offer and insists that he's innocent until proven guilty, but Vision says that might not be true. Marvel is currently being judged in the court of public opinion, and he's on trial by television. Surprisingly, and at the goading of Vision and Rick, Marvel decides to take Carol up on her offer. Not to spoil too much later in the story, but that's not Carol Danvers. That right there is a Skrull which has just successfully infiltrated Avengers Mansion. Minutes later, a Quinjet leaves Avengers Mansion through the roof. Marvel and Carol are immediately pursued by the S.H.I.E.L.D. jets standing by. Marvel waits until the other aircraft pull into formation before testing to see if a Quinjet can outpace them. When Marvel goes to test it out, he leaves Nick Fury in the dust. Craddock calls Fury on the Visio screen. He's outraged that Fury left a hole in his formation through which Marvel could escape and calls Marvel a proven traitor. Fury reminds Craddock that Marvel hasn't actually been charged with anything. As to why Fury let Marvel escape, he tells Dum Dum that he remembers the Japanese-American relocation centers of World War II. He further clarifies that he did not do this for Marvel. He did it for America. As Marvel flies away, Vision comments that he hopes that they acted wisely. What does that mean? Well, up to this point, the Avengers have just about always worked hand in hand with law enforcement, and this move changes that. Rick takes a moment to reflect that in the superhero stories of his childhood, it was always easy to tell who the good guys were and who the bad guys were. The path of good always lined up with the path of justice and law and order. In the real world, things are far more complicated, and Rick bemoans the fact that these days you can't tell the good guys from the bad without a scorecard, and, well, there ain't no scorecard. Inside the mansion, Vision continues to make everybody else second-guess their decision about Marvel. Outside, a fight breaks out between a big fella and a smaller guy who was trying to stick up for the Avengers. Goliath doesn't think twice about charging into the street and picking up an average citizen by the scruff of the neck. The smaller guy tells Goliath that he should have noticed that this was a setup, as he needed one of the Avengers to leave the property in order to pass along a court summons. Goliath is ready to continue beating up the little guy, but is stopped by Vision and Pietro, who insist that they tell people what really happened in Alaska. The Avengers agree to show up for a session of the Alien Activities Commission the next morning and are met by a massive crowd of protesters at the courthouse. The public is angry that the Avengers let a Kree soldier go free. Once inside the courthouse, Goliath is surprised to see the Fantastic Four are also in attendance, but he's reminded that they were the first Earthlings to come in contact with the Kree. Craddock begins the hearings and lets it be known that this is part of an investigation into the aliens infiltrating our nation and the people who may be aiding and abetting them. The entire thing reeks of McCarthyism. The first witness to be called to testify are the three technicians. The trio recount being reverted into cavemen. Once they reverted back, the Avengers swore them to secrecy to prevent public panic, but also possibly to cover for their Kree buddy, Captain Marvel. Next to testify are the Fantastic Four. Reed Richards doesn't know much about the Kree, and is willing to take the word of the Avengers that Captain Marvel is a good guy. The Thing, on the other hand, is more skeptical because, as he says, he doesn't know any of these Avengers. What happened to Thor and Iron Man? Ben thinks the Avengers should have had Marvel join them in court instead of avoiding the law. This brings about another violent outburst from Goliath, the second this issue. Craddock calls for order and has Vision take the stand. His first question is if it is true that Vision is an android or artificial human. Vision affirms that, yes, he is. Craddock then dismisses the witness because, according to him, Vision's testimony has no value before the court on the grounds that a robot can only parrot what others tell it to say. Craddock insists on speaking to one of the humans behind him. Vision states that he is an android and not a robot, but Craddock could care less about the difference. His goal is to win over the television audience by getting them scared of anybody who is different. Vision, whose voice is always unemotional, makes a last-ditch plea to Craddock to stop his witch hunt before it does irreparable harm. Vision's plea almost reaches the hearts of the television audience until Craddock insists the investigation continue. Sitting in the courtroom, Rick Jones is reminded of a dream from the night before. In it, Marvel and Carol reach the abandoned upstate farmhouse, but when Marvel goes through the front door, he's attacked. Rick Jones, perhaps due to his connection with Marvel, knows that it wasn't just a dream and races out of the courthouse. We later discover that the dream was inserted by the Supreme Intelligence. Craddock calls for Rick to be brought back, but he's already escaped. Craddock demands that Rick Jones be found, and court is adjourned until tomorrow. As the Avengers leave the courthouse, they find themselves surrounded by protesters. Goliath wants to physically attack them, and although Wanda complains that that would be too violent, it doesn't stop her from using her hex power against the crowd. Probably not the best optics in the moment. Once they get home, Avengers Mansion is a wreck from the outside, and even worse on the inside. Poor Jarvis looks overwhelmed by the mess. He explains that once the hearings started, the crowds outside burst down the doors and flooded into the mansion. Jarvis turned off all the protective devices to ensure that nobody got hurt. Pietro tells Jarvis that he did the right thing, but Captain America walks in and insists that the rest of the Avengers didn't do the right thing. Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor all show up and are in agreement. The three of them feel that the rest of the Avengers acted irresponsibly by shielding Marvel from the investigation. By the authority invested in these three via the Avengers bylaws, Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor disband the Avengers for all time. Then as they leave, Thor gets a little salty, saying, "Ye who were Avengers, stand back." Goliath wonders how they have the right to show up and do such a thing, but Vision ensures him that the bylaws clearly state that it's within their authority to do so. Instead of packing up, the four Avengers turn and walk away, while Jarvis is left with a ransacked and empty townhouse. Issue 93 begins with Vision bursting into a room with Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor. He's begging for help before collapsing on the ground. The three Avengers gather round and try to decide if the android is living or dead, but they can't seem to decide how to check an android for that. Does one check their breathing? Do they have a pulse? A voice interjects and says that an android doesn't. The three heroes look about for whoever spoke to them, but see nobody. As Thor readies himself for battle, a microglass extends from the wall, and all three of them can now see Hank Pym. Oddly, he didn't arrive as either of his more recent aliases, Yellow Jacket or Giant Man, but instead arrives in his original Avengers garb as Ant-Man. This is a great throwback, but obviously takes the rest of the team by surprise. Even though as of a couple issues ago, Hank is now an ex-Avenger, he received a call for all of the original Avengers to gather by the river. Being a bit of a wise guy, he came dressed as an original Avenger. Captain America points out that Hank said ex-Avenger. It's almost as though he doesn't realize that he broke up the Avengers last issue. Hank insists that Vision not having a pulse doesn't mean anything, and we learn that it was Iron Man who called this current meeting. Cap reflects that Hank might know more about the Vision than anybody else, and Thor recalls that it was Hank who first brought Vision to life. Hank corrects him by pointing out that he created Ultron 1, but that it was Ultron 6 that eventually built and activated Vision. Hank needs to find out what's wrong and decides to enter the android through his mouth. He's joined by a few of his ant buddies for good measure, but one of them perishes a short distance inside, so Hank orders the rest of them back out. I'm skipping over a few pages here because it's not really relevant to the larger story arc, but if you ever want to read up on the inner workings of the Vision, this is the issue for you. To make a long story short, Hank has wacky adventures, finds a loose wire in the Vision's brain, he fixes it, and exits through the mouth. After exiting Vision, Hank doesn't wait around for him to wake up. He takes his leave and makes it clear that if the Avengers really do need him, yes, he's available, but he no longer wants to answer the call to assemble. After they wave goodbye, Vision rises from the table and mentions the fact that they recently dismissed 4 Avengers. This is technically not true. They disbanded the Avengers, meaning that they dismissed every Avenger and ended the group. I would expect Vision to be a little bit more precise with his language being an android, but he did just wake up and all. Thor swears that they did no such thing, but Iron Man takes Thor by the arm and insists that perhaps they did do such a thing. He then passes along Jarvis's resignation letter, which references their disbanding of the Avengers. Turns out that this is the whole reason why Tony called the meeting today. Vision recounts the events of the past few days, including the government hearing with Craddock and the original Avengers showing up and disbanding the group. Vision says that after they left the mansion, the heroes traveled by car, but were treated suspiciously everywhere they went because everybody knew that they were accused of shielding one of the planet's enemies. The crew drives to the upstate farm where Carol and Marvel are holed up. They arrive to find a locked gate. Goliath climbs over the fence to see if he can find Carol and Marvel. The Vision offers to help Wanda over the fence, and Pietro completely overreacts, obviously feeling threatened by his sister's recent romantic interest in Vision. Vision takes to the skies and begins flying over the farm when he unexpectedly passes through what he describes as the gates of hell, before coming crashing to the ground in front of 3 very familiar-looking cows. Neither Wanda nor Pietro saw where the rays came from that struck Vision down, but suddenly these cows around them begin shifting form, each turning into a different member of the Fantastic Four. Once again, Quicksilver is taken out by a single punch from a strong guy, but the biggest surprise is seeing the Thing use Mr. Fantastic's stretching ability. One would assume that these 3 cows were the 3 Skrulls Mr. Fantastic left in the field in Fantastic Four Volume 1, Issue number 2, but since one of them is using 2 of the Fantastic Four's powers at the same time, we know that that individual has to be Super Skrull. Wanda fares a little better than her brother, but not much. Vision sinks into the ground in order to hide, while the Fantastic Four imposters leave with Wanda and Pietro. The Reed Skrull makes the comment that these 2 are their prize and they can go. Afterwards, Vision rises back to the surface and returns to Avengers Mansion, where he collapses until he's saved by Hank. Vision is ready to return to the farm at once in order to save his fellow Avengers, but the others won't let him return alone. And what happened to Captain Marvel after him and Carol Danvers escaped the mansion in a Quinjet? Both have been captured by the Skrulls. We catch Marvel shouting in surprise that Skrulls walk the earth once more, and I love the Skrulls' correction. Not once more, Man of Kree, but still. These are the same Skrulls that encountered the Avengers outside. They seem pretty confident in their victory when a sensor alerts them that they missed one of the Avengers. Not only did they miss Goliath, but they also failed to grab Rick Jones, who warns Goliath that the Thing and Human Torch are coming their direction. Goliath fails to recognize the danger, and the Thing charges in and lands a solid blow. Rick dives into a nearby stream in an attempt to get away from the Human Torch. He does manage to get one good splash in before being scooped out of the water by Mr. Fantastic. Rick wants to know who these guys are because he knows that they aren't the Fantastic Four. With no need to keep up their appearances, they drop the act and reveal themselves to be the Skrulls who landed on Earth in Fantastic Four Issue number 2. They tell us what's up. After months of living their lives like cows, a Skrull hyperbeam revived them. He's about to reveal their mission on Earth, but reverts back to Reed Richards when a fresh batch of Avengers draws near. Inside the headquarters, Marvel is attempting to escape before the Skrulls return. He uses the restraints on his wrists to activate his unibeam, which reflects off of the reflective surface going around the outer wall and destroys the box that is generating the energy holding Marvel in place. With that out of the way, Marvel is capable of bursting free from his bonds. The Skrull's greatest mistake? Underestimating Captain Marvel. Marvel frees Carol and tells her how dangerous an all-out war between their 2 species will be. This intergalactic war will span thousands of worlds across light centuries of distance. Carol points out that if Marvel is the only Kree on Earth, then his people have no idea that the Skrulls are even here. Marvel, although he renounced his heritage, knows he must send a message home. In order to do so, Marvel is going to build a piece of technology the Skrulls have sought for years, the Omni Projector. A device that is great at instantaneous communication, but can also be used as one of the most dangerous weapons of the cosmos. Marvel is going to build one out of his Unibeam and some parts that the Skrulls have laying around their lab. Once the projector is complete, Carol asks to see it, but her questions end up prompting Marvel to destroy it because he feels that now he knows the truth. It isn't Carol Danvers, but another Skrull. Outside, the Avengers seem evenly matched in their battle against the Fotastic Four. Inside, Marvel learns that he's not facing off against just any Skrull, he's facing off against Super Skrull. It makes sense that he's here, as we saw it foreshadowed earlier. Super Skrull doesn't keep fighting against Marvel. Instead, he knocks him out with nerve vapor, and then tells us that he came here to get Marvel, Quicksilver, and the Scarlet Witch. And now that he has them, it's time to get out of here. He lets Marvel know that the Skrulls outside are expendable, but Super Skrull, well, he's not. It's then revealed that the entire inside of the farmhouse was a Skrull spaceship that takes off. As for the heroes outside, the tide of battle has turned in their favor. Before the ship can leave, Goliath increases his size and leaps up to grab the vessel, and begins repeatedly striking its side. During the middle of his rampage, Goliath shrinks down to a more manageable size and slides off the ship. Thor saves Goliath, who it turns out hadn't taken his growth serum for days. Goliath is perturbed at having to be saved by Thor and acts like his manhood is threatened. The issue ends on a down note. 3 of the Avengers are beaten, and at least one of them feels like a loser. Additionally, 2 Avengers and Captain Marvel have been kidnapped from the Earth. Issue 94 opens with the Avengers putting the Skrulls to sleep with a sedative ray. Shortly after they are all asleep, Iron Man gets in contact with the Fantastic Four, who recognize the 3 Skrulls from their previous encounter. Captain America asks if Reed might have any ideas what the Skrulls are planning, but Reed doesn't have a clue. Goliath wants to know what happened to Vision. That takes us back to just a little bit earlier. As the Skrull ship escaped, Vision flew towards it and entered the ship. For some reason, the Super Skrull is telling his plan to Captain Marvel, whom I'm not sure can hear since he got knocked out by the gas. Because Wanda and Pietro are mutants, the Skrull is capable of using their brainwaves to guide him towards others with similar brainwaves. Others the special Skrull must destroy. Yeah, except we have since learned that neither character is a mutant. But anyways, who is it that the Super Skrull must destroy? The Inhumans. Super Skrull is ready to commit inhuman genocide with the push of a button, but is stopped by a punch from Vision. Super Skrull dives at Vision, but he forgot that Vision can make himself intangible. This isn't too far-fetched, as the Super Skrull once forgot about one of his own superpowers, hypnosis. Super Skrull makes himself invisible and uses the opportunity to run over and pull the lever. And oh yeah, the Skrull unleashes an inferno upon the Inhumans, but the city is protected from the blast by the Null Barrier. It appears as though the reason the Skrull wants to kill the Inhumans is because they are a creation of the Kree. With his attack thwarted and no ideas on how to get past the barrier, Super Skrull resigns himself to returning home with his 3 prisoners. Vision is alarmed by this, but when Super Skrull asks if Vision thinks he can stop him, Vision gives an honest answer and says no, and then proceeds to tell the Super Skrull how he could use the powers of the Fantastic Four to defeat him. Once Vision sees that he can't win, he makes the logical decision to leave and fly back to the rest of the Avengers. As he's leaving, Vision has a moment where he's thinking of the Scarlet Witch and says that he feels as though he left his heart behind. Do you know what year it is? Do you know what year it is? You do now. It is 1971. And why did the Skrull switch all of his prisoners from one contraption to another? The 2 siblings were lying down before, and now everybody is in an upright test tube. Super Skrull tells us that he used the 3 Cow Skrulls to act as the Avengers, and they were the ones who disbanded the group. That absolutely happened and makes sense, check, but he says that they did all that just so they could capture Wanda and Pietro, and it seems like there should have been an easier way to kidnap those 2 that didn't involve masquerading as Earth's mightiest heroes, showing up at Avengers Mansion and breaking up the team. How did the Skrulls even know about the Avengers bylaws? I mean, Goliath's an Avenger, and he didn't even know that. Although Super Skrull never directly says it, I assume he kidnapped the mutant siblings because he needed their brainwaves to lead him to the Inhumans. Could he have used any mutant? Did it have to be those two? Once he located the Inhumans, he shot one super powerful but ultimately useless blast out of the ship and immediately left when that didn't work. He left Earth with Wanda and Pietro to take them home as a prize, but now that Super Skrull is in space, he says that they are of no further use to him. It might seem picky, but this motivational change takes place across 2 pages. Before Super Skrull can kill his mutant captives, he comes upon the area to space-time warp out of. This may not seem like much, but I am pretty sure that this is the same portal that becomes a huge point of contention in the Galactic Storm crossover. After passing through the warp, the ship arrives in the 5th quadrant of the Andromeda Galaxy. Super Skrull is hoping that by returning home with Captain Marvel, that the Emperor will end his exile, which was imposed after previously being defeated on Earth. Meanwhile, Marvel is psyching himself up with head games, wondering if he might be able to trade the death of Earth in return for stopping the war. How does that even make sense? Both the Kree and the Skrulls see Earth as a very minor player. Why would they stop a war because Marvel lets them destroy an insignificant planet? Is he seriously consider selling out the Earth? As the Super Skrull ship comes in to land, the Royal Palace begins firing warning blasts at his ship. The craft is still capable of landing, and Super Skrull exits, wanting to know the source of this incompetence. As he exits, another group of Skrulls is instructed to open fire and aim to kill. Super Skrull uses his powers to dodge their shots and remarks that he is fortunate because they don't dare use their most powerful weapons this close to the King's chambers. Super Skrull then takes out his attackers. Watching from a Vizio screen is Emperor Dorak, who is telling Princess Anel that the battle is not going in his favor. Anel insists that he could stop all of it, but with a single gesture. The Emperor dismisses her thoughts as childish and says what is really on his mind. He's afraid that the Super Skrull wants to wed his daughter and displace him. Well, we know that the Super Skrull actually does want Anel's hand in marriage and has at least considered overthrowing her father in the past. Still, as one would expect, Emperor Dorak has more tricks up his sleeve. He unleashes an energy sphere which encapsulates Super Skrull. Super Skrull tries the might of the Thing to escape, which doesn't work, so then he attempts to use fire. The fire creates a noxious smoke within the bubble, making it so that Super Skrull can no longer breathe. Dorak had prepared for this day. When he created the Super Skrull, he also ensured that he had a way to defend against him. Anel is ashamed that she didn't know this. Dorak is ashamed that he doesn't have a warrior son to carry on the line. Ho! Wow, harsh burn. Hold up, I have one bone to pick about this whole situation. Previously, it had been established that the Super Skrull receives power from an outside source, or else he couldn't use his special powers. This is how Reed Richards tracked him down the first time. We are told that no single being could harness the power of all 4 members of the Fantastic Four at once without the assistance of an outside power source. We must acknowledge that somewhere along the way, the rules for Super Skrull have changed, as his reliance on an outside power source is no longer a defining aspect of this character. Dorak wants to see what Super Skrull has brought him before deciding between execution or imprisonment. Dorak recognizes the great Captain Marvel and knows of his recent exile by Ronan. Note that Dorak refers to him as Usurper Ronan, which holds an implication that he doesn't see Ronan as the legitimate ruler. Anel, who never seemed to be this stupid in the past, in fact, she always seemed rather ruthless, thinks if Marvel hates Ronan, then he must be a good guy and suggests that her father free them. The Emperor just about has an aneurysm. He can't let Marvel go. Somebody of Marvel's rank knows the secret of the Omni Wave Projector, which we've already covered is both the greatest communication device in the galaxy and can be used as one of the most powerful weapons to ever exist. Emperor Doric would use the Omni-Wave projector to finally win the Kree Skrull War. Marvel pokes the snake a little by pointing out that the Super Skrull has already tried to get that information from him and failed. Doric slyly mentions that Marvel is a prisoner of war and is thus protected from abuse by the Convention of Fornax. But Doric argues that since Pietro and Wanda aren't from a civilized enough species, that those rules don't apply to them. The two Avengers are transported to an unknown place where they are confronted by a large beast. Quicksilver attacks, and surprise, it does no good. Wanda has better luck with her hex powers and creates a small avalanche over the beast. Behind Pietro and Wanda stand a bunch of fluffy pink drops who were last seen in Fantastic Four Volume 1, Issue number 37. This lets us know that our heroes are still on Tarnax 4, the Skrull Throne World. Before our heroes can figure out what to do next, the large beast breaks free from the rubble. Doric and Marvel watch the battle unfold. Marvel can end the battle at any time by agreeing to share the secret of the Omni-Wave projector. As one would expect, Marvel is prepared to sacrifice his friends to keep a weapon of such destruction out of the hands of the Skrulls. Quicksilver attempts to make the monster dizzy using a wall of speed. His whirlwind of speed picks up the drops and starts bouncing them off of the beast. Whenever one of the beast hits it, it bursts into several more drops. The drop then start reproducing at a mind-boggling rate until both beast and heroes are buried beneath them. Wanda tries to look on the bright side as they die. At least Marvel didn't betray his people or the Earth. Doric cuts off the Visio screen and Marvel demands their release. When push comes to shove, Marvel gives in and agrees to share the secret of the Omni-Wave projector. Doric then brings Pietro and Wanda back into the chamber. Both of them are upset at Marvel for giving in, and the Skrull demands that Marvel get to work on the Omni-Wave. This is a little different. We're shown a scene that looks like it's from a funhouse mirror, and props to Neil Adams for this crazy-looking spread on perspective. The pointing fingers are attempting to extract a confession from an alien. When we are shown the scene from another angle, we can see that it's not an alien, but instead it's some poor guy strapped to a chair with a large red dome draped over his head. The 3 engineers from the government based in Alaska are being held captive by the federal government and treated as test subjects. As the engineers leave the test room, they reflect on the fact that they should have listened to the Avengers and kept their mouths shut. Craddock gets furious at the mention of the Avengers, whom he calls traitors and berates the heroes for failing to show up in court on the second morning. Craddock has now received a new court order allowing him to launch a new plan. But first, back at Avengers Mansion, Nick Fury calls and tells Captain America that he hears Acapulco is nice this time of year. This is obviously a heads up that the Avengers need to go somewhere else. The Avengers seem too despondent to act on Fury's warning. Clint tosses the last of Hank's growth serum on the floor and claims to no longer be Goliath. This feels out of place and over the top considering everything else that's going on at the moment. Vision flies into the mansion and lets everybody know that whatever is going on, the Skrulls, the Kree, and the Inhumans are all involved. The team doesn't have long to reflect on this new information because Craddock arrives and demands that they come out at once. Once the Avengers get outside, they see that Craddock now has full military support on hand to bring them in and has tanks rolling towards the mansion. Mind you, all of this is to bring the Avengers in so he can finish questioning them for his hearing. All they had to do was show up to court, but Craddock's response does seem over the top. Craddock assumes that the Avengers are going to refuse to submit to his questioning, and to ensure he can bring the heroes in, he's brought along special SHIELD shock troops to help enforce his court order. Out of the copter step 3 mandroids who start blasting. We do get a special note in the corner that lets us know that these mandroids have no relation to Mandroid the Living Robot, which was introduced in Captain Marvel Volume 1, Issue number 18. Goliath resorts to violence right away, which is exactly what the mandroid was expecting. Mandroid uses his entire body as a weapon against Goliath. Captain America is ready for battle, but Iron Man tells him to hold back. Captain makes the sly remark that Iron Man acts like he designed the Mandroids. This story takes place before everybody knew that Tony Stark was Iron Man. Iron Man did design the Mandroids, but he's forced to say that Tony Stark did. He goes on to explain that the suits and the men inside of them were trained to take on superheroes like the Avengers. Captain America is up for suggestions. Iron Man turns on his roller skates to perform an attack he knows that the Mandroids are not prepared for. He knows this because as Tony Stark, he was the one who trained them. Iron Man's opening attack is a success in what has the potential to be a prolonged battle. The rest of the Avengers charge into battle, while at the same time a scaled creature crawls up from the sewers. Many of you probably recognize him as the Inhuman Triton. Issue number 95 backs things up 1 hour from where we just left off, and we're shown Triton climbing out of the ocean. Due to the rampant xenophobia sweeping the United States, this is a bad week for somebody who looks like Triton to come to the surface. Triton is chased off the dock and steals a car. He's attempting to locate the Fantastic Four because of Craddock's operation at Avengers Mansion. Triton is spotted by the police. He flees on foot before seeking refuge in the sewers. He comes back out of the sewers in the middle of the battle between the Avengers and the Mandroids. Triton has no idea what he's walking into. The Mandroids take down Iron Man and Vision. Craddock thinks that he has the Avengers beat and starts to thank Nick Fury for his assistance in capturing them. Nick doesn't seem too pleased about this and warns Craddock that the Avengers are pros and he shouldn't celebrate too early. And sure enough, seconds later, 2 of Craddock's 3 screens which are patched into the Mandroids go blank. At the scene of the battle, Iron Man has removed the power pods at his waist and directed their electrical energy at the Mandroids, who soon fall. Thor wants to know how Iron Man knew to do that without hurting the men inside, and Tony Stark dodges the question. As Rick Jones lends Triton a hand, Goliath drops a sick burn and refers to him as the second-hand Submariner. And I always thought that was Aquaman. Triton tells him to ignore his wounds. He came here seeking the Fantastic Four, but was besieged and attacked at every turn since coming ashore, and by chance ended up at Avengers Mansion. Triton has arrived to stop a war between the humans and Inhumans. The quick rundown. All the Inhumans live in the Himalayas in the city of Adelon, the same city Super Skrull attempted to wipe off the map. Their king, Black Bolt, has been overthrown by his cousin Maximus the Mad, who used his mental powers to become king of the Inhumans. He then used a mental blast to give Black Bolt amnesia. 3 Inhumans then leave to find him. If you are interested in that story arc, check out Amazing Adventures, Volume 1, issues number 5 through 8. Captain America is more than willing to help and is about to order everybody to California before Vision steps in and says no. Good bot. He's there to remind everybody to keep their priorities straight. He reminds them that there is an interstellar war going on and that 2 of the Avengers have been kidnapped by one of the alien races. He says that they aren't doing anything to resolve that situation. Oh, I love it. Iron Man is pissed off at the implication that the Avengers don't look after their own, but Vision keeps it coming by pointing out that the Inhumans are protected by a bomb-proof dome and that Thor's hammer could transport them to the Andromeda Galaxy right now. And somebody, this time it's Goliath, has to say, let's find a way to help both groups. It's awesome to see Captain America step in and suggest that Vision name the teams. Cap is right in his assessment about Vision being the best one to make such a determination, but the rest of the group is much more likely to fall in line and let Vision do it since the suggestion came from Captain America. Captain America, Rick, Goliath, and Triton will all head to California. Vision, Iron Man, and Thor will head into space. As the Avengers make their game plan, the United States helicopter pilots are waiting to carry out their next set of orders. After the Mandroids have been down for 5 minutes, they launch Contingency Plan R-M, which I think stands for Remote Mandroids. The pilots hit the Mandroids with their manual masers, which get them back up and onto their feet. The pilots inside are still knocked out, but each of the machines will now be controlled remotely. As the battle begins once more, Captain America, Rick, and Triton fly up to California while the rest of the Avengers face down the Mandroids. We also see that it wasn't logic Vision used in picking his two teams. What he wanted to do was ensure that his team contained the strongest members and therefore the greatest success of rescuing Wanda. A short time later in San Francisco, a bunch of 1950s style-looking gangsters have all cornered the overthrown king of the Inhumans, Black Bolt, and want to force him to use his superpowers to help them pull up a crime spree. He's protecting a young lad named Joey who is taken captive at gunpoint. Captain America arrives in the nick of time, saving the day by using his shield to knock the gangster out. Now that Triton has located Black Bolt, Captain America is ready to take off. Triton makes it clear that he could care less about the fate of the rest of the Earth as long as he can focus on meeting his goals. Black Bolt starts spazzing out, and Triton insists that Black Bolt wants the rest of the Avengers to help him with a matter of life and death. Considering the haughty attitude Triton was just pushing, I'm a little bit surprised that Captain America agrees to come along without getting any additional details. As they head out on the mission, Joey is prepared to stay behind, but Black Bolt wants to take him along, and the rest of the Avengers give the go-ahead to take a child that doesn't belong to any of them out of the country and into a possible combat situation. Sure, sounds like a keen idea. At least Goliath is willing to say what I assume many of the readers are thinking. They just wish the Avengers were rushing off to save Wanda and Pietro instead. As they fly away, Roy Thomas shows us that each character carries with them some form of inner turmoil. We're then given some backstory on the Inhumans. I'm not sure how much of this is ground that is already covered in other comics, but I know that some of the information that is revealed here is new, and it connects the dots on the Inhumans' connection to the Kree Skrull War. Black Bolt thinks back to when he and Maximus were both teens and Maximus's powers first started to develop. Maximus would use his mental abilities to pull off pranks at the expense of others. Maximus seemed to take joy from controlling lesser minds. One evening, Black Bolt was walking through a deserted part of the Great Refuge when he saw a light descending through the energy dome. As he neared it, he heard an unearthly tongue speaking the language of the Inhumans. Black Bolt discovers Kree soldiers on Atalan's soil. These Kree are working for Ronan and brokering a deal whereby once Maximus is taken over the Inhumans and Ronan is taken over the Kree, then they would both work together to rule Earth as vice-regents. Odds are is that neither side would abide by that agreement for long, but they both seemed amenable to working together at the moment. At the sight of Maximus plotting with foreign invaders, Black Bolt rushes into the room. Maximus calls for Ronan's lackeys to flee to their galaxy and take with them the secret weapon that he provided. This is the moment that led to the initial and inevitable clash between Black Bolt and Maximus. While they fight, Maximus makes fun of his brother for not being able to control his greatest weapon, his voice. Black Bolt finally gets in a good punch, but it's too late. The Kree ship is already taken off. In that moment, Black Bolt's anger burst through the dam, which has been holding it back, and for the first time, he truly uses his power. His shout has an immediate effect on Maximus, who reflexively lashes out with frenzied mental beams. Between the crushing sound and the crushing mental waves, the saucer is tossed to the side, and the Kree pilots inside become dazed. Both the Kree ship and its rocket crash on the palace, and when the dust clears, King Agon and Queen Renda, parents to Black Bolt and Maximus, have both been killed by the destruction. Back on the East Coast, Iron Man has used Tony Stark's knowledge of the Mandroids to dispatch of them once more. During the short period of time the battle takes place, Vision has had a change of mind, and now he wants his group to help Triton before taking off to space. Thor, having previously learned the location of Atalon, uses his hammer to transport them near the Great Refuge. Upon arrival, the Avengers find the entrance to the Great Refuge blocked by the Null Barrier. Thor tosses his hammer against it, but it has no effect. With the kind of timing one can only expect to find in movies, sitcoms, and comic books, the other team of Avengers fly by and arrive on the scene. Black Bolt steps forward to confront the barrier, and Captain America instructs the rest of the Avengers to back up and prepare for things to get loud. Black Bolt stands before the null barrier, where he shouts a single one-syllable word and shatters the barrier. It would have been kind of cool to know what a guy who speaks so seldom said, but whatever. And amazingly, just on the other side of the barrier, Maximus has an inhuman army ready to fight against their ex-king. And the Avengers waste no time running in and attacking a bunch of Inhumans who were doing nothing more than attempting to protect their homeland against foreign invaders. Thank goodness the battle doesn't have time to turn into a full-scale slaughter. Black Bolt surprises everybody by speaking. Even though he whispers, the words echo like thunder. He commands them to lay down their weapons and accept him as their rightful ruler. The booming of his voice breaks Maximus's mental control on the Inhumans, who pull a 180 and immediately start shouting for the death of Maximus, who is hanging out with some of the Kree in the royal palace. Upon seeing that Maximus has lost control of the situation, and that his own people are now storming the palace, the Kree are ready to abandon the Inhumans. Maximus is convinced that the masses will never reach him because he has sealed the stairs off with negative energy. Unfortunately, he didn't think to reinforce the walls with negative energy, and one comes crashing down as a hammer soars through it. Coming right behind is heard the call, "Avengers, assemble." The Kree holds a big gun and looks ready for battle. Rick saves Goliath by swinging in on a rope and kicking the Kree. Wait, where did he get that rope? Was he already waiting up there? Goliath rushes back into the fray, but knows that he has already gone overtime with his last dose of growth serum. Rick feels left out after making his big save, and suddenly he's struck from behind by a rocket-powered Kree soldier. From there, the soldier flies into the fleeing Kree spaceship. In the moment, this always feels like a very random event to me, and we'll later learn that that soldier was influenced by the Supreme Intelligence. Following his defeat, Maximus is returned to his state of stupefied madness, and Black Bolt is left feeling guilty because he was the one who originally brought it on. One quick question. Where the heck has Joey been through all this? Yeah, remember the child that Black Bolt insisted come with them? Black Bolt decides to return to America to let his cousins know that the Great Refuge is free once more. I think that might be Joey following Black Bolt. Kid must be cold. He left dressed for San Francisco weather, and now he's wandering around in the snow-capped peaks of the Himalayan mountains. Issue 95 ends with a quick recap of where all the major players are. There is one key piece of foreshadowing present here. The captive Supreme Intelligence lets us know that he is the real puppet master when he says, "The players are all in place. Let the final phase begin." This is the second story arc in a row in which the Supreme Intelligence is shown as the Master Manipulator, or Puppet Master. This is a trait that will continue to follow the character and is a theme that runs through nearly every major story arc involving the Kree. Issue 96 begins with the Avengers at what is the first appearance of the S.H.I.E.L.D. space station in the pages of Marvel. Nick Fury is there and warns the Avengers that Kradec might fire him for what he's about to do. It's kind of nice for Roy Thomas to take a panel to show the Avengers walking through the space station and mentioning how impressed they are by it. Nick Fury gives the Avengers access to a spaceship and mentions that all it needs is a power source. All of this is being done in a way that will give Nick Fury plausible deniability so he doesn't have to take any heat from Kradec for helping the Avengers steal a spaceship paid for by US taxpayers. The spaceship they put him on is flying fast. I'm not sure how fast, but faster than I would have thought Earth had any spaceships ready to fly. Fast enough that it makes good time while heading towards another galaxy. A few panels later, we're told that the ship emerges from hyperspace. Hold up. Earth now has hyperspace technology? That's kind of a big deal and opens us up to play with the big boys and perhaps have a spot in the intergalactic marketplace. A question left hanging from a moment ago is, how are they going to fuel the ship? And I'm shocked to see Thor using his hammer to power the spaceship. In this panel, Thor attributes the ship's speediness to the use of his hammer as a power source. I don't 100% know every rule surrounding Thor's hammer, but why are they even in a spaceship? Why isn't Thor using the hammer to teleport them where they need to go? Vision previously stated he could do that. Iron Man has noticed that Vision is taking a personal interest in saving the twins. As one might expect, they run into some resistance on the way to their destination. The Avengers come face to face with the Imperial Armada of the Skrulls. The Avengers ship appears on the Skrull radar. The Skrulls suspect a trap and note that even the Kree wouldn't send a lone spaceship against such massive numbers. All the Skrull spacecraft are ordered to stop. The Skrulls switch over to a manual scan as they believe their radar has been tricked. When they look, they see a vast armada that outnumbers their own. The Skrull is about to withdraw the Imperial Armada, but Imperator Dorak comes on the Visio screen and orders them to investigate, making certain that this isn't a trick. The Armada commander goes forth to explore using his own ship. The Avengers thought their trick had worked until that lone ship comes forth. The Avengers know that if they can take out this one ship, they still have a chance of convincing the rest of the fleet to retreat. The Avengers enter the battle in 4 smaller ships, and Iron Man just flying in space. As the enemy ships near each other, the Skrulls fire a missile. Thor exits his personal spaceship and intercepts with his hammer. Why did Vision and Thor even take spaceships? Iron Man turns back some deadly impulses with his repulsor rays. 3 times across 2 pages, it's mentioned that there is no sound in space. I wouldn't be at all surprised to discover if those lines were added to ensure that Stan Lee didn't come through and insist on throwing some automatopoeia into the middle of every explosion, as he was a big fan of putting in a good pow or pop or boom onto the page. Vision also decides to leave his ship behind. Vision and Thor rush the Skrull ship and tear it open from the outside. The Skrulls are amazed at the impossibility of 2 creatures surviving in space while being unaffected by the Magnoforce, which is stopping everything inside their ship from getting sucked outside the ship. The 2 Avengers continue to hold off the Skrulls until they receive some relief from Captain America and Goliath. Captain America and Goliath pull up and just unleash their guns straight into the hole torn into the side of the ship. This is just brutal. Not only that, but the Skrull ship the Avengers are up against contains a full contingent of weapons. It's kind of embarrassing for the head of the Skrull Imperial Armada, with all of their weaponry, technology, and superior numbers, to be taken out by Earth's first ship that's capable of hyperspace travel and 5 angry bros. Captain America shows no regard for taxpayer money when he chooses to abandon his ship as a missile to attack the Skrull ship. Captain America jumps out from his ship to join Iron Man, meaning now that all but one of the smaller ships have been abandoned. Iron Man heads in to help the other 3 while leaving Goliath outside to watch for any other incoming ships. By the way, who is supposed to be looking after their main ship while everybody else jumps aboard the burning Skrull ship with a hole in its side? The Skrulls are scanning their ship to locate the Avengers, but having no luck. It doesn't take long for them to find them as Thor knocks the door from its hinges. Once they are inside, they let the Skrulls know that they have to return their friends and turn back their armada, or the Avengers are going to rip the ship apart. Captain America senses Vision's romantic interest in Wanda as Vision tenses up at the mention of her name. So I think everybody now knows that the Vision is crushing on Wanda. Commander Kalksor is in the middle of a fight or flight moment. I've never been sure which, because he's interrupted by Emperor Dorak, who wishes to deal with the Avengers personally so that he doesn't put this ship or the rest of the fleet in any unneeded danger. The Emperor appeals to the Avengers by showing them Captain Marvel, who is working at making the Omni Wave Projector. The Avengers are shocked, and Iron Man starts freaking out a little bit about how little they actually know about Captain Marvel. The Skrull goes on to tell them that Marvel agreed to do this in exchange for the lives of Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch. That's going to make the Avengers feel a little better. Not much, but a little. Emperor Dorak orders his guards to bring Marvel over to confirm his story, but when the guards go to retrieve him, their hands pass right through him. Marvel then leaps out from behind them and strikes both guards from behind while reprimanding them for not knowing that the Omni-Wave Projector, is also a projector and can cast images. The Omni-Wave Projector, it calls, it kills, it projects. In an instant, Marvel has one of the guards' guns and has released Wanda and Pietro, whom sit right up. Marvel attempts to shoot the Emperor, but he is protected by an energy shield. As things escalate out of control, calls on Kalksor to execute Plan Delta. Kalksor is capable of relaying the Emperor's message. Captain America attempts to stop him so that he can question him about Plan Delta. Vision flies in and picks the commander up and demands that he shares what he knows about Plan Delta and the location of the Skrull throne world. When the Skrull refuses, Vision continues to pummel him, threatening him with death if he doesn't tell him what he knows. Iron Man calls for Vision to stop, telling him that he doesn't know what he's doing. I love Vision's response, and this is more than once now that him and Iron Man have gotten into it a little bit. Another correction, Iron Man. My brain is a miniaturized high-speed computer. I know exactly what I am doing. I am killing him. Iron Man and Thor pull Vision off, insisting the Skrull was about to talk. The Skrull, oddly, does tell them what they want to know, insisting that it'll do them no good. A miniature ethercraft carrying a super nuclear warhead has left the mothership and is headed toward Earth. Instead of taking over our planet, the Skrulls have just decided to nuke it. Clint is still on patrol outside and is called upon to stop the ethercraft, even if it comes at the cost of his own life. Clint gives chase and manages to land on top of the other craft before it slips into hyperspace. Clint then bursts through the ceiling to find the 4 Skrulls in the ship. One remarks that this is most likely another Earthling with a superpower. Clint hears this and decides to play up the part. He agrees with the Skrull. Remember that Goliath's growth serum has worn off and that he doesn't have any more. It's one man versus 4 Skrulls for the fate of the Earth. Back on the Kree homeworld, Ronan is angry at what his fellow Kree brought back from Earth. He wanted them to recruit the Inhumans to help them battle against the Skrulls, but instead they brought back Rick Jones. At first, Ronan doesn't recognize him while he berates the Kree soldiers, but then Ronan recognizes Rick Jones as one of the humans who helped the Avengers destroy the Kree Citadel on Earth. Rick Jones doesn't like getting poked in the chest and snatches a rod away from one of the soldiers. Rick swings the rod like a bat and breaks it in two against Ronan. I'm not sure what Rick was thinking, as this couldn't have seemed like a good idea. Ronan slaps Rick so hard he sends him airborne into the closest wall. Even while he's down, Rick keeps talking trash to Ronan, making fun of him for picking on somebody smaller than himself. Ronan likes the cut of Rick's jib, in particular his courage to stand up to Ronan. Instead of killing Rick, Ronan decrees that Rick will be his personal body slave. Ronan wants to ensure that his new servitor is capable of humility as well as courage. He grabs Rick by the arm and starts pulling him along beside him. He walks Rick Jones out onto a balcony to show off the Kree's galactic fleet of ships. Upon reaching Earth, the ships will either take it over or destroy it. Rick gets a little wise. He wants to know why, if the Earth is such a small planet of no consequence, crawling with barbaric life, then why are the Skrulls and the Kree willing to kill each other over it? Why not let the Skrulls have Earth and just walk away? See, the Earth has caught both species' attention of late, and it happens to lie in a strategic location midway between the Andromeda Galaxy and the Kree, thus making the Earth a planet of interest. Once again, this will all play an important role in the Galactic Storm storyline. Ronan thinks the Earth has little chance of surviving the upcoming conflict. Rick Jones attempts to run off, and Ronan tells him that the Earth has a better chance of surviving than Rick does of ever leaving planet Hala. Ronan captures Rick and makes it clear that he thought that Rick would accept his fate and become a good lackey. He actually says the word lackey. Ronan seems genuinely confused. He thought that Rick would consider himself fortunate to be the last survivor of his species. Rick only considers himself fortunate because it'll give him the opportunity to kill Ronan one day. Spoilers? That never happens. Afterwards, Ronan tosses Rick Jones into the Hall of Judgment. The Supreme Intelligence introduces himself and lets Rick know that his world will most likely survive the conflict ahead. He goes on to explain that he is not a living creature, but a multiplicity which works together to manifest one being. Rick then says what many must think the first time they see the Supreme Intelligence. The big green guy is really ugly. Rick keeps the sharp questions rolling by asking if the Supreme Intelligence is so smart, then why is Ronan running the show while he's locked up? The Supreme Intelligence insists that it underestimated Ronan, a mistake it claims it won't make again. Ever since the Supreme Intelligence was overthrown, it has been spinning webs and putting plans into action. Ronan's attack has left the Supreme Intelligence weak. Therefore, his mental waves can no longer penetrate the energy shields that the Kree and Skrull used to shield them from such attacks. Instead, the Supreme Intelligence was forced to find a weaker and unprotected mind. He latched on to H. Warren Craddock and made him obsess over the Avengers. That would make sense, but we later find out that H. Warren Craddock has been a Skrull this entire time, and the Supreme Intelligence just told us that he could no longer penetrate Skrull energy shields. Moving on. The crazy dream that forced Rick to flee the courthouse was also caused by the Supreme Intelligence. Also, it was he who stopped Marvel from realizing that it wasn't Carol Danvers who came to the Avengers mansion and offered Captain Marvel sanctuary at the farm. Once again, I thought that he said that he couldn't penetrate Kree energy shields. Why did the Kree soldier fly off with Rick instead of another Avenger? The Supreme Intelligence moved him to do so. He claims to have caused all this and more. Rick believes him, but wants to know, now what? He then gets his answer. Rick is being pulled backwards. The Supreme Intelligence says that this is the most important part of his plan. As Rick Jones is being pulled headfirst through a portal, the Supreme Intelligence gives us more foreshadowing. Thus begins the final gambit in our game of galaxies. This day you shall decide the fate of worlds without end, if you survive. Rick Jones comes out the other side of the portal, where Marvel's looming head is screaming for forgiveness. Rick is back in the negative zone, and yes, you see it coming up from behind him. Headed his way is Annihilus. Everybody's favorite alienating arthropod is back for round 2 in the same arc. Issue 97 opens where we left off. Annihilus is racing towards Rick Jones. A single second passes, and Rick Jones sees his life flash before his eyes. But he also receives another vision of things happening at the same time across the cosmos. And this more or less serves as a recap as we head into this final issue. Marvel is returned to working on the Omni Wave, while Quicksilver and Wanda are fighting off Skrulls in Emperor Dorak's chambers on the Skrull throne world. Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, and Vision are all on the Skrull flagship of the Imperial Armada. Ronan is on Hala watching his fleet of starships leave for Earth. H. Warren Craddock continues his desire to root out alien spies. Goliath is facing off against 4 Skrulls whose small starship carries a super nuke that has been ordered to be detonated on Earth. Finally, the Supreme Intelligence waits alone inside the Hall of Justice while tugging on all the threads and waiting for its schemes to play out. How in the world are they going to wrap this up in under 20 pages? Annihilus recognizes Rick from the Baxter building when the Avengers tossed him back through the portal. It appears as though Rick is no longer protected by an aura of negativism. Annihilus wants to annihilate and attempts to choke Rick Jones to death. From out of nowhere, Annihilus is hit with a blinding bolt coming out of Rick Jones' forehead. The bolt is strong enough to send Annihilus hurtling a vast distance. Afterwards, Rick Jones is left floating within the negative zone. Back on the Skrull throne world of Tarnex 4, Quicksilver is using his careening ability to juggle Skrulls through the air. Wanda is attempting to get Marvel's attention, but he's trapped himself within a sphere of negative energy. Dorak must have fled the chamber successfully because he shows up on the Visio screen insisting that Marvel will die the moment he drops his shield. Princess Anel asks her father to stop the attack for the final time on the grounds that the Omni Wave isn't worth any more Skrull lives. Emperor Dorak disagrees. His eyes are filled with a lust for power. He has his shriveled green heart set on gaining the ultimate weapon and then killing all of the Kree. He goes as far as to say he would then kill his own daughter if she wasn't his only offspring. Dorak returns to his Visio screen where he watches the energy sphere around Marvel dissipate. Now's its time to strike. Once Marvel is out, we find out what's up with Rick. Marvel has attempted to contact Rick through the Omni projector to get a message to the Avengers, but in the process, Marvel had the unintended consequence of hurling him into the negative zone. Oh no! No! Seeing as how the Supreme Intelligence was expecting what happened to Rick Jones to take place, there is a good chance that he was behind this mistake. Marvel then has a revelation. He understands that the Omni Wave is too dangerous for anybody to use. Yes, exactly. Hasn't that what you've been saying all along? For the second time this story arc, Marvel destroys an Omni Wave projector as soon as it's built. It's just crazy to think that he's now built 2 Omni Wave projectors and then destroyed both of them almost as soon as he finishes them. We get a pretty big reveal here. Looking for the answer to this question years ago drove me nuts, and I couldn't find the answer at the time. Wanda wants to know why Marvel can't use the Omni Wave as a weapon. Marvel explains that the Kree designed it as a harmless communication device, but to any non-Kree mind it turns into a death ray. You know that the story behind when the Kree first found that out has to be absolutely horrifying. Back in the negative zone, Rick Jones is closing in on the area where 80% of all negative zone stories go to end, the center where everything is transformed into antimatter. Rick is certain he is done for, but then he thought he was done for when he went up against a nihilist as well. Rick concentrates really hard and starts flying. He then sees a portal appear and dives through it. When Rick comes out the other side, he arrives in the Hall of Justice once more and wants the Supreme Intelligence to tell him what's happening, but the Supreme Intelligence doesn't have time for that. The Supreme Intelligence starts stroking Rick's ego by telling him all the things he's waited his entire life to hear. Rick is told the hour is at hand to prove that he's worthy of his cosmic heritage. Rick, an orphan his entire life, has no idea what the Supreme Intelligence is talking about and starts getting excited. The Supreme Intelligence then corrects himself. He didn't mean Rick's actual parents. He was speaking metaphorically about the human race as a whole. Seriously, that was the one time I genuinely felt hyped for Rick Jones. You can feel it when he says cosmic heritage. The back of my neck tingles. And just like seemingly always with Rick Jones, crushing disappointment as the road goes nowhere. The Supreme Intelligence is afraid that his plans have been discovered by Ronan. Ronan is using the universal weapon to monitor the Supreme Intelligence's chambers. Ronan notices that the room is using too much power and he suspects the Supreme Intelligence is plotting against him. Ronan was keeping him around for future use, but he now sees the error of his ways and realizes he should have killed him sooner, a mistake he will rectify right away. As Ronan rushes towards the chamber with his soldiers, the Supreme Intelligence tells Rick that he has to strike now or they will lose. Rick has no idea what he's talking about, so the Supreme Intelligence explains that deep within Rick that he carries memories of heroes as great or greater than the Avengers. Heroes he read about in comic books as a kid in the orphanage. Rick strains to remember as many as he can. Golden Age comic book heroes begin to spring forth and take form before them. The heroes going clockwise are the Submariner, Captain America, Finn, Angel, Blazing Skull, Patriot, Vision, and Human Torch. As Ronan and his troops enter the room, the Supreme Intelligence instructs Rick to send his creations into battle. It hurts Rick's head to do so, but he sends the heroes into battle. As the battle rages, it's referred to in one panel as the Galactic Alamo. The Kree provide no challenge for the mythical heroes, who easily take them out. They are winning the battle, but start fading away almost as fast as they came. Ronan sees an opening and tells his troops to kill one and smash the other to bits. The Supreme Intelligence doesn't seem worried. He's too busy concentrating on Rick Jones. He tells him that the heroes left, so that Rick's brain can consolidate its new power. But now, after all that other stuff, now comes the final test. Rick knows. He's not certain how he knows, but he knows what he needs to do. His head just hurts so bad. Energy engulfs Rick. He tosses out his arm, and from it springs a bolt which extends beyond the chamber and stretches out into the cosmos. The bolt travels across the entirety of the universe. When the light reaches Tarnax 4, Marvel goes wide-eyed and is stunned. At the same time, the scrolls around them become frozen in place. Quicksilver notices that Marvel appears to be acting as a transmitter for the light. From Marvel, the bolt of light travels skyward once more. This time it's headed toward the Skrull Armada. Just like on Tarnax 4, when the light arrives, the scrolls become frozen in place. Well, not exactly frozen, more limp. That or Captain America just picked up a dead Skrull. Iron Man states that whoever did this has to be one of the most powerful beings in the universe. Vision rolls in with some solid logic. Speculation isn't going to do them any good at the moment, and he suggests that they finish their trip to the Skrull Galaxy. It appears as though the Avengers return to their own ship. Wish I could have seen how they got there, since each one of them abandoned their own ships. I assume they stole something from the Skrulls, or perhaps Thor just used his hammer to bring them right over. This is the one panel in this arc that I would love to see on the big screen. The Avengers flying through a perfectly still, perfectly silent Skrull fleet. Each ship with a crew standing by, but nobody moving. Rick Jones has encountered the same thing as everyone else, but with the Kree. All of the Kree around him are frozen in place. He calls the Supreme Intelligence Big Brain and asks him what happened. Before the Supreme Intelligence will answer his question, he insists that he needs to show Rick one more thing. Rick is shown the face of H.W. Craddock. Rick Jones sees Craddock giving a stump speech and can read his mind. While Craddock pounds the pulpit, we learn that he's using verbal hypnosis to control people. In the middle of his speech, Craddock is also struck by the bolt from Rick's head. Craddock then changes his form to reveal that he is a Skrull. It is unclear why Craddock isn't frozen in place like the rest of the Skrulls. The verbal hypnosis is worn off, and one doesn't have to imagine how the crowd might react to such a revelation. The Skrull dives into the crowd and attempts to stretch away. This is our first clue that the Skrull disguised as Craddock is one of the same Skrulls that attacked the Fantastic Four in Fantastic Four Volume 1, Issue Number 2. Remember that 4 Skrulls fought the Fantastic Four, but they only captured and turned 3 into cows back then. This is that 4th Skrull and is confirmed towards the end of the arc. The Skrull lands on top of the crowd, who then pull him downward and beat him to death. Rick drops this line. Is that all there is? A few seconds of shouting and hitting, and it's all over? Rick starts to feel guilty about his role in the death, but the Supreme Intelligence distracts him by telling Rick what's up with these crazy new powers. The Supreme Intelligence convinced Marvel to construct the Omni Projector, which the Supreme Intelligence then used to unleash dormant powers within Rick Jones. I'll take a moment to say that the power Rick Jones used in this issue is later named Destiny Force, and is typically triggered by an outside entity instead of by the humans themselves. The Supreme Intelligence lays it all out there. Both the Skrulls and the Kree have fought for eons, but the Supreme Intelligence has recognized that both races are at an evolutionary dead end. The two foes fight back and forth now as rivals, but now a new rival has blossomed in the physical space between both races, and each are afraid that humans are the superior race. Rick Jones catches on that any Earthman can potentially tap into the Destiny Force, and the Supreme Intelligence agrees and points out that a day will come when all humans will tap into this power. After the recent strain and taking in so much new information, Rick Jones collapses. For a moment, the Supreme Intelligence is stunned into inaction before tearing a hole in time and space from which he transports Captain Marvel and all of the Avengers involved except Clint to this chamber. Marvel is feeling guilty about using the Omni Wave to contact Rick and thinks he's responsible for Rick's current status before being corrected by the Supreme Intelligence. Rick Jones is suffering from mental overload. The Supreme Intelligence tells us that he can't cure Rick because he can only influence humans through their dreams. That's a interesting tidbit, or maybe he's saying that because he wants the Avengers and everybody else to believe that. Now comes the rub, the salty, salty rub. The only person who can save Rick Jones is Captain Marvel, and in order to do so, he has to combine with Rick once more. You can see the fear and desperation in Marvel's eyes. Remember that Marvel once said having a wrist monitoring device spelled the end of his freedom. Marvel doesn't want to do this, but the Supreme Intelligence guilts him into it. He asks to have a moment before giving up his freedom once more. He takes this moment to walk around the room, reflect on all of the frozen Kree. He takes a moment to think of Princess Enel. We're told here that Enel will be taking over as Regent of the Skrulls in place of her father. I understand they are trying to wrap up the story here, but how does Marvel know that? All of this just went down in the last 5 to 10 minutes. It goes on to say that Marvel once hoped that Enel would become even more. Considering his established history with Medic Una and Carol Danvers, these lines are a surprising development. To that end, we have to wait 30 years before we get a full answer to what he fully meant in Young Avengers Volume 1, Issue number 11, published in 2006. If you know of another title that has more info on this moment, please let me know in the comments below. I have a bit of a problem with these panels as they don't exactly fit into the timeline we just covered anywhere, but somewhere Enel found an opportunity to conspire with Marvel to overthrow her father. She wanted to find a way to bring both races closer together, and her father kept going on and on about not having a proper heir. Enel decided to give him one, and her and Marvel made some sweet, sweet love. From the unlikely union of these two races was born the future young adventurer, Hulkling. The Kree have a long history of mixing with other races, and traditionally, if your father is Kree, you are considered Kree. So Hulkling, at least by the Kree, is considered to be a Kree. I wish I had remembered this when I did my recent video on the early life of Carol Danvers. Spoilers, but it has recently been revealed that Carol's mother, Mary L., is Kree. I will be curious to see how this plays out moving forward. Mary L. goes as far as to call Carol a daughter of Hala by blood right and starlight, but stops short of calling her Kree. If established canon is given the proper respect, then Carol should never be accepted as Kree by the Kree. Back to the Kree Skrull War. More than anything, this panel is foreshadowing the upcoming relationship between Marvel and Enel. Marvel is ready to combine with Rick Jones once more. He steps forward and their bodies become one. As soon as Marvel is in place, Rick Jones sits up. For everything that took place, the Supreme Intelligence kind of ends things on a downer that makes one wonder if the journey was worth it. As he sends the heroes home, he says, "It's time for you to depart, that all may be again as it was. Kree and Skrull at uneasy peace, your planet safe. Rick Jones no longer has access to his latent power, and the Supreme Intelligence rules the Kree once more. At the end of the day, everybody is going home. Well, almost everybody. There's still the matter with Clint, but I'll get back to that in a minute. The Avengers are returned to their mansion where they find H.W. Craddock standing on their doorstep. I think this is the first and only appearance of the real H.W. Craddock. Nick Fury tells the Avengers that they've never seen this man in their life. The Craddock they know was the missing fourth Skrull from the Fantastic Four issue number 2. Fury comes dangerously close to breaking the fourth wall when saying the Fantastic Four licked the Skrulls their second time out. Fury also confirms for the Avengers that it was the Supreme Intelligence who was manipulating Craddock to act the way that he did. Now that he's free, the real Craddock has cleared the Avengers of all charges. Fury wants to know where Goliath is. Iron Man gives a horrible answer for an Avenger. We've been trying not to think about it. But it's not like they've even tried to check in on him either. So what did happen to Goliath? We don't get an answer until Avengers Volume 1, Issue 99. Clint had boarded a Skrull ship and found himself on the wrong end of a gun. Instead of trying to fight, he turns and runs. He finds a good hiding place and hopes he has enough growth serum in his veins to possibly will himself larger. The groans he makes as he strains to force himself to get bigger catches the attention of the Skrulls, but while he flexes, Clint remembers his time as a former boy archer. The Skrulls run towards Clint, thirsty for blood. Clint isn't quite sure what happens next, but it looks like the shots from the Skrulls broke loose a drain with wiring attached. The Skrulls call Clint a fool and challenge him to find a weapon. In seconds, Clint forms a bow and starts using items from around him as makeshift arrows to fire at the Skrulls. He informs them that his name isn't Fool, it's Hawkeye. A single shot from Hawkeye blows up the ship's mainframe. The Skrulls are distracted, so Hawkeye jumps into a smaller ship and escapes. He hasn't gone far before the ship explodes, but the superatomic bomb doesn't go off. From there, Hawkeye crash lands on Earth. The first people he meets are from a carnival in Yugoslavia who have never heard of the Avengers. He needs money to get home, so Hawkeye joins the carnival as an archer for a while. That wraps up the Kree Skrull War. Just to recap some of the major events that transpired, because there is so much to take in. Captain Marvel and Rick are finally separated for a while, and it was awesome. Sentry number 459 reappears. Ronan shows back up. The Skrulls infiltrate and disband the Avengers. Jarvis quits. The Avengers fight the Skrulls from Fantastic Four issue number 2. The Avengers help Captain Marvel escape the law. The Avengers face a government investigation which they blow off. The United States government brings tanks and mandroids to Avengers Mansion to get them to comply with a court summons. Maximus was wheeling and dealing with the Kree behind the rest of the Inhumans' backs. The Super Skrulls attempted to nuke all of the Inhumans. We saw Black Bolt use his powers 3 times and speak once. We saw the Kree Empire change rulers twice and the Skrulls once. Skrulls show that they can infiltrate deep into human society. Destiny Force was introduced. Hank Pym and the Wasp retired. Clint Barton stops being Goliath and becomes Hawkeye. We learn that the Supreme Intelligence is a master manipulator. Annihilus shows up twice, foreshadowing a future conflict. Rick Jones summoned the heroes of the golden age of comics from out of his brain. The Omni Wave Projector was created and destroyed twice. That's a pretty good list. I'm sure that there's still more stuff that I'm forgetting. My point being is that despite the Supreme Intelligence's claim that everything will go back just like it was before the story started, this just isn't the case. The Marvel Universe has been changed and expanded on. Moving forward, plot lines continue to get more and more complicated and spreading outwards towards ever greater grandeur. And the writers keep exploring the deepest and darkest corners of cosmic comics. Now I start preparations for the Thanos War. Thank you for joining me. Feel free to hit any of the buttons below. I'm out.